Using your shoulders as a defensive tool is a skill that has been popularised in recent years by Floyd Mayweather, predominantly out of the Philly shell guard. Floyd became an absolute master of boxing out of this stance, where he was able to block the jab with the right hand, ride shots off the lead shoulder, and nullify hooks and uppercuts from the guard itself. Mayweather Jr. was undeniably one of the best boxers to ever use his shoulders as a defensive tool. But whilst it's his name that's linked the most with shoulder defense, he didn't invent it. And for over a century, boxers have been subtly using their shoulders to defend themselves. An art form picked up by his uncle and father, meticulously drilled into Mayweather for decades, instilling a skill set strong enough to dominate 5 different divisions in his career. Now, the shoulder roll was usually considered to have been popularised in the 1950s by Hall of Fame boxer and trainer George Benton. Benton was blessed with one of the greatest ring IQs in history, having beaten the heavyweight champion Jimmy Ellis despite only being the middleweight and middleweight champion Joey Guardello. After finishing his fighting career under the tutelage of the legendary Eddie Futch, Benton would go on to train the likes of defensive wizard Pernell Whitaker and other slippery fighters in Mike McCallum, Meldrick Taylor and Evander Holyfield. But even before Benton dazzled spectators with his defence, fighters like Benny Leonard were using shoulder defence all the way back in the 1910s. Leonard is proof that fighters of the old school era of the turn of the 20th century still had that defensive instinct at the very top level. Something that often gets dismissed, with old fighters being labelled as more stiff, sluggish and not as advanced as the fighters of the modern era. The more you look at old fighters like Charlie Burley from the 1940s or Henry Armstrong from the 1930s, the more you realise that a lot of these defensive skills that the likes of Mayweather, James Toney and Pernell Whitaker have dominated with in recent decades all stem from the great fighters of yesteryear. And most of the modern day greats who have mastered shoulder defence will say this themselves.
You have that rolling style.
Oh, yeah.
We see Floyd Mayweather doing it. We see the younger fighters trying to get it through. You thinking he copied you or you copied him?
Who? Excuse who?
Floyd Mayweather when he...
Who copied who?
He copied you.
Who copied?
Were you the original?
I'm not the original. The original person is Elder Childs. And you should know that.
There you go.
Elder Childs, just walk out, you know, step back, bop, bop, you know, come back. I took it from them.
Like James Toney, so many fighters since have taken shoulder defence and added it to their own arsenal, myself included. But there are of course the likes of the legendary defensive genius Pernell Whitaker, chain-smoking defensive wizard Nicolino Loche, the phenomenal James Toney, who did it the best in the pocket that I've ever seen, and the body snatcher Mike McCallum as just a few standouts. And all of these skills can be learned and transitioned into your own boxing style. All you have to do is watch and pick it up from the greats. Now with shoulder defense, you don't necessarily need to make it your style. I see a lot of young fighters make the mistake of just trying to fight out of the Philly shell, when ultimately when that gets worked out, they come unstuck. Even Mayweather, in the instance against Zab Judah being the standout, reverted back to a high guard when the Philly shell wasn't working. Now before you start working on your defensive skills using your shoulder, it's important to master the basics, as this is what you're relying on the most part to get out of trouble. That can either be getting your feet out of distance or soaking up shots, or just slipping as most normal fighters do. However, adding the shoulders to your arsenal will make you such a tricky opponent. Now whilst Mayweather is the most popular of recent times to use shoulder defense, the most underrated and craftiest with subtle shoulder defense in my opinion was Gennady Golovkin. And Golovkin's shoulder defense went so under the radar. Now there are a few things that make it effective, especially when you're fighting up close. Now the first is you have to be relaxed, believe in your chin and let it come instinctively. This is all about reacting. Typically it will be when you're coming out of range when you use your lead shoulder to defend. You'll have to tuck your chin underneath the lead shoulder, and it's usually wise to take a step away as you do so to prevent the follow-up shot from landing. Now what stood out about Golovkin for me was not just his lead shoulder defense, but also his rear shoulder. Notice after how he throws the right hand and he's overextended, how he dips underneath his shoulder here. Now this is anticipation for the left hook, and you have to be careful that you don't leave your body exposed for a liver shot. But Triple G's rear shoulder defense really was what set him apart and made him even better defensively. Being able to pull this off, especially after overextending the right hand and leaving yourself in a vulnerable position, is like a get out of jail card.
Gloving away at that cut as well.
Shot could turn it for...
That's the shot. And then move again. Sit, cut.
Now, rear shoulder defense isn't just great defensively, but also gives you opportunities to land your shots. Just make sure you get out of range afterwards and re-establish your control with a jab. Now, as I've already touched upon, you don't want to make shoulder defense your primary defensive tool. If you're being overwhelmed, it's not going to work. The art of it is just to add it when needs be to make you a trickier opponent to work out. In doing so, it will make you a more adaptable fighter. You'll just be able to go off the cuff and react to things as well, especially if you make a mistake. Even the best fighters ever make mistakes. Being able to instantly adjust and rectify that mistake instantly will make you so much harder to beat. For instance here, I get caught with a right hand and my opponent instantly follows up. The shoulder gets me out of trouble, and I use Mayweather as a reference to show that this even happens to the best. Now, the place to work on this is sparring. This is Golovkin sparring Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And we see him really just focusing on these defensive tricks using his shoulders, and it just makes it all the more clearer how good he was defensively. And the thing with shoulder defense is you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So it's best to gradually integrate it into your style during sparring sessions that are nice and controlled. Now, when we talk about inside fighting, you can also use your shoulders here, not only as defense, but to manipulate your opponent and put them where you want them. You want to make yourself a small target when you're fighting up close, with your head planted against your opponent's chest. Now, you're obviously not allowed to barge, but you can use your shoulders to control your opposition up close and ride shots off. Now, some of the best inside performances are Julio Cesar Chavez's beatdown over Edwin Rosario. And you can notice how Chavez rides shots off his shoulders to keep the pressure up close. And the best that I've seen, that's very rarely mentioned, is Roberto Duran's against Carlos Palomino. If you notice in both of these performances stated, as well as the likes of James Toney against Iron Barkley, the aggressive fighter's guard isn't always up. Shots ride off the shoulders, and that's because they need to be relaxed when fighting up close. The ability to relax up close will allow you to see the shots, ride them off, and burn much less energy in comparison to your opponent. And of course, having a low guard in the pocket will also entice your opponents to throw shots. The ability to ride them off the shoulders whilst remaining in range gives you the opportunity to counterpunch. And this is ultimately the same at distance. A low held lead entices your opponent to throw their own right hand, which you can either ride off or slip, and then instantly catch him with the counter right hand with all of their momentum coming forward. The art of making shots miss with the shoulders is one that the very best fighters all usually tend to pick up. But most people limit it to the shoulder roll and the fiddy shell, when really it's one of the most diverse defensive skills in the game. It's high risk, but can work at any range, and once you learn how to use it and make it instinctive, it can be one of the most rewarding parts of your boxing style. So just to recap, when you're using your lead shoulder to ride the right hand off, make sure that you're tucking that shoulder behind your chin and moving your feet slightly out of distance. You either want to make sure that you're completely out of distance or just keep your right hand up to protect you from a left hook landing. When you find yourself in a vulnerable position to receive a left hook, just dip your chin behind your shoulder and lead on the front foot very temporarily. Whenever you're doing this, make sure your body is protected and the other side of your head, and ultimately, don't abuse it, just use it when necessary.